Hello, everyone. Lisa Sabaniak here from lifelikeyoumeanit.com. Welcome to our October book club, where we are talking about the Fifth Agreement today, a book that is written by a father-son team, Don Miguel Ruiz and Don Jose Ruiz. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of background about the book in general and the Ruizes. So last month in September, our book club was about the Four Agreements. And of course, this was written mainly by Don Miguel, the father, Don Miguel Ruiz. But I believe that his son, Don Jose, did also have some part in that book, but more so in this book, in the Fifth Agreement. Now, they are sharing basically Toltec wisdom. So this is ancient wisdom passed down from generation to generation. And if you didn't read the Four Agreements and you haven't seen that video, it's okay, because this book kind of reminds you, it takes you through a little bit of the agreements, each of them individually, not in the same kind of depth, but for us to be able to understand everything that goes on in this book, the Fifth Agreement, we have to revisit those Four Agreements anyways. So we're going to cover a little bit about those. I'm just not going to go into them as in depth. And if you would like to look at them more in depth, then please go and have a look at our book club video from September 2019 and have a look at that. So without further ado, if you have any questions with this, if you have any comments that you'd like to share, if you've read the book and you'd like to contribute, if I am giving my point of view and you think that, you know, my point of view, I took a little bit something different from it, I would love to hear from you, because that's what this is all about. A book club is really supposed to be a bunch of people giving their different opinions about their takeaway from different chapters and different messages within the book, not just one person sitting here giving theirs. So I would love to entertain your thoughts. And if I end up missing you on the live version here and you end up watching on the replay, please still feel free to comment, because I'll get notifications that you have, and I can come back in and have a look, and we can have a bit of that carry-on conversation within the comments. So, without further ado, the one thing that you really need to know about the Fifth Agreement in order, and the the Four Agreements really, to be able to fully understand this book, is that the Toltec wisdom, or the wisdom from the Ruizes, father and son authors of these books, is that they are talking about symbols, right? They use the word symbols a lot in the book, particularly the Fifth Agreement. And they're talking about something like language. There's something as simple as language, never mind art and all the different ways we have of expressing ourselves, but language is the main focus here. And they remind us that there were humans that would have existed that didn't have verbal language, that they didn't know how to communicate with each other. And they would have drawn pictures, and they would have had maybe some sounds that meant things. And maybe they started to scratch things in walls and things like that. And eventually language started to develop. Now, we all know that there are many languages on this planet, right? So that means that all of these different societies all around the world, as they're developing their language, they are all coming up with words that have essentially the same meaning, but they are different words from, say, English or French or German or whatever. Now, the only reason why everybody knows that the word chair means this thing that I'm sitting on is because we all agree. At some point, humans all agreed that the word chair means this thing here that I am sitting on. Your kitchen chair that you can sit on, right? Any kind of chair. And you're just thinking right now, wait a second, actually, there's lots of different types of chair, and we all know them as the same thing. And that's their point, is that when we are trying to come up with a symbol for something, we all have to agree on its basic meaning, or else it's pointless. And we've done that with all kinds of different languages on this planet. And when we translate, we end up translating back into our native tongue, and it has to all make sense. And that's the same thing with the language that we use to describe our feelings, and the language that we use to talk to ourselves and to boost ourselves up or to put ourselves down, or anything at all that we are doing to try to share with other people. And we're doing it with language or with art, things that other people are going to understand. And we only understand them because we've all agreed on them. And what they are saying loud and clear, particularly in the fifth agreement, is just because we all say that this thing I'm sitting on is called a chair, doesn't mean that that's what this is. It just means that we've all agreed that this is called a chair, and that when we say the word chair, we all know the rough idea of what we are talking about. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it is true, right? And so they talk a lot, particularly in the fifth agreement, but also in the four agreements, about the stories that we spin for ourselves. And this is where it all comes back to, is this concept of language in particular. Okay. So I'm going to go through very quickly the four agreements, because otherwise the fifth agreement doesn't make any sense on its own at all. And you'll see what I mean when I get there. So the very first agreement is to be impeccable with your word. And again, if you want to get more in depth for the four agreements, go back to the video from September and watch that, because it was all on the four agreements alone. So I'm going to just kind of rush through each of them just to catch us all up to speed. Okay. So your word needs to be impeccable is the first agreement. That means that you are being truthful with the language that you are using, the symbols that you are choosing to use to express yourself, both to other people and to yourself. And a really clear example of that is the inner language that we have to ourselves. When we say things to ourselves like, oh, I can't believe I did that. I'm so stupid. I can't do that. I'm too dumb. I can't do that. He would never fall for me. I'm too ugly. When we say those types of things to ourselves, we are using a story to tell what we think is a truth. But deep down inside, we know that that is not the truth. And so there's always going to be a little tug of war then between our higher self that knows that this is not true, that part of ourselves, whether you want to call it your unconscious mind, your higher self, your angels or your guides, whatever it is, there's a part of you that knows when you're saying that it's not true. You are telling lies. So be impeccable with your word is just as much about what you're saying to yourself as it is about what you are saying to other people. But certainly this is where things coming in like gossiping. I used to be a very big gossip when I was younger, certainly in my teens, where I saw everybody else talking about their friends behind their back and even their family members and things like that. And I thought that's what you needed to do to be popular and for people to think that you were in the know. And so I was guilty of that really big time. And as I started to read the four agreements in my 20s and started to realize, wait a second, I'm spreading lies, even the ones that I didn't feel like I was intending to harm anybody. I was choosing to not be impeccable with my word. I was choosing to share, not even necessarily a lie, but to be telling somebody outside of that person's confidence, right? Something that they wanted, they had shared just with me. So be impeccable with your word is about what you are saying to yourself, but it's also about what you are saying to others and the idea of distorting the knowledge that you have. Now, the Ruiz brother or father-son team are very specific here. They talk a lot about domestication and talk about distortion of knowledge. And knowledge to them is all, and domestication is all about all of the lessons that we end up learning as little children to be able to fit into our society. So a great example of this is our religion. When we're just a baby, we can't even understand what the word religion actually means. When we're a 2-year-old, we are whatever the religion our parents are. And if they're not religious, then we're not religious, right? And so they might not even realize anything about religion until you're in your teens. And then at that point, your family might say, well, go out and find yourself and find the religion that fits best to you. But you've already learned all the lessons from that religion, right? So that's a really great example of there's no harm. Nobody was trying to be menacing in teaching you their religion and bringing you to their church of worship, for example, right? Just like trying to teach you how to be truthful, be honest with others, treat other people with respect. Those are all things that allow you to fit into your society. And depending on where you live in the world, of course, there's going to be different societal norms. And so you are taught right from you being old enough to even remember your first thoughts, your first lessons, the first words that you would have been speaking, right? And so this is the type of knowledge and the type of domestication that we have. And the Ruizes are basically saying that this is just a story, right? That whatever societal norms that we are each coming from, the differences that are between, say, my society growing up in Canada and your society, say, growing up in Pakistan, the only differences that are there are the perceived differences from the people that taught us as we were growing up, right? So they are stories. They are not necessarily the truth, right? So their whole idea behind the 4 agreements and then the 5th is looking at this concept of the symbols that we use and the lessons that we have learned and all. So the second lesson, or the second agreement that we have, is to not take anything personally. So they use, in the 5th agreement, they use a really amazing analogy that I'm just going to share. I haven't copied and pasted. I'm just going to kind of give you the gist of it. If you were to visualize yourself going into a movie theater, right, a cinema, and there's only one person in that cinema, and you sit behind that person and you start to watch the film and you realize it is a film of your life. And then you realize the person that's sitting in front of you is you, a version of yourself, watching your life. And you watch how you are perceived. You watch all the things that you know about yourself, the way that you speak, the way that you act, the way that you feel. And you watch all the secondary players come in, maybe your siblings, your parents, your friends, your partner, everybody that is playing a secondary role in your life. And you watch their behavior. Yeah, this is bang on. This is an excellent film. Might as well be a documentary. I didn't even know that the cameras were there, kind of thing. It's so real. Then you decide you're going to check out what is going on in the theater next to you. And you go in and you realize that it is your mom's film. And so you go in and you sit behind your mom who's watching her film. And you're not the center of her film. She's the center of her film. And as you're watching her film, you see some of the secondary characters that were in your film that are not really being shown in the same way as what your film showed them, as what you know them to be, right? Your siblings, your dad, maybe even your partner. And then you come in that film and you realize, well, wait a second, that's not me. I mean, it looks like me, but I don't sound like that, or I don't act like that. You're like, okay, I'm leaving. I'm going to go to the next film. And you go in there and maybe that's one of your siblings. And the same thing. The secondary characters are acting and looking just a little bit different. You come in, swear, that is not me. It looks like me, but it is not me. You go into your partners and the same thing. And the point of it is that you can't take anything personally because nothing is about you. Everybody's going to have their own perspective of you and who you are and what you sound like and what you do and what your motivations are and what your inspiration is, and all of that is going to be different from what your motivation, your inspiration, your feelings, your sound, they're all going to be different because they're all looking through different eyes of people who have had different life experiences, who just see things differently. Right? You can go back and look and say, I'm going to go back into my mom's video. I'm going to watch her film unfold and realize, I would never say that that's my mom. I mean, she's going to see herself differently than how you see her. Your siblings, your partner, your friends, all of their films are going to be just slightly different. Might be the same scene that unfolds in front of you, but their perception of it is going to be different. So the point of the second our second agreement of don't take anything personally is that nothing that others say or do is ever about you. And I could even go into more depth and say, even when you've actually done something wrong and you've upset somebody, the way that they are responding to that is actually not about you, right? They have to be able to believe that in order for them to feel that way. So, for example, if you say you did something, you got caught gossiping about your friend, and you didn't have any ill will towards them. You weren't going and sharing a lie. You were just sharing something that they had shared with you. You weren't doing it in a menacing way, but they found out about it and they were heartbroken because they feel like they can't trust you, right? They have to have that part of themselves that feels like they can't trust, that somebody's going to break that trust in order for them to react in that way. So in essence, even though you've done the action, their reaction isn't actually about you, it's about them. The third one is don't make assumptions. And this one is a pretty self-explanatory one, I think. Right? We get into so much trouble when we make assumptions about things. When we think we understand why somebody is doing something, we think we know what the motivation is, we think we know what's going on in their head, and don't even lie for a second to yourself. We all do it, right? Especially when somebody is doing something that you've maybe done something similar, or you've been in a similar circumstance. I know that I do this all the time, still to this day. This is one of the biggest ones that I struggle with. And that's because I feel like I've got a great understanding of myself and what triggers me. And I spend so much time reflecting on my behavior, how I react and act in different situations, and why I do that, so that I can understand myself better. And I can decide for myself if I want to do that again in the future, if that was actually acceptable, or if it got me into any kind of trouble along the way. You know what I mean? And so when I have that level of reflection, it is easy for me to have somebody else be going through something and me to make the assumption that they're having the same sort of reaction, right? And of course, they're their own person. Just because that's how I reacted and I self-reflected and I understand that, doesn't mean that they are actually going through the same thing and working through the same steps as what I did, right? That's a huge assumption that I've made. And it's all in an effort for me to try to understand them better so that I can help them better. When really what I need to do is to just stop and make sure that they know that I'm there for them, and they can explain to me what's going on so that I don't make any assumptions. But assumptions is something that gets us in a whole mess of trouble, right? Relationship breakdowns, when people assume things. Like with NLP, I know one of the big things that I end up hearing a lot where people make assumptions is where they say things like, well, he didn't call me last night, so he obviously is cheating on me. Or he didn't call me last night, so he doesn't love me anymore. Or he didn't call me last night, so it's over, right? Making an assumption, a link between things that don't necessarily have to be true. And you can argue that assumptions is what gets us into a lot of our wars and our conflicts around the world. The fourth one is to always do your best. And so what I really love about the fourth agreement is that it isn't saying that it is saying that every day is different and we need to honor ourselves for where we're standing that day. But what it's not saying is that one day, you might feel great and you can put in 80%. And then the next day you don't feel great, so you put in 20%. And then the next day, it's not saying that. It's saying every day you should be putting in 100% towards meeting your agreements, these 4 agreements, but that each day is going to change. So what your 100% looks like today might be different from what your 100% looks like tomorrow, and that is okay. And if you catch yourself making assumptions, or you catch yourself taking something personally, you catch yourself not being impeccable with your word, that tomorrow you can make an agreement with yourself that you're starting again. You're putting in 100% again. You'll be impeccable with your word. You won't take anything personally. You will not make assumptions, and that you're going to do your best. All right. And I mean, I caught myself just this morning making assumptions that trying to help my sister with something, right? So, tomorrow is another day. I put in 100% today, and my 100%, I caught myself making the assumptions after I had made them or in the middle of making them. And at least I caught them. And so I can let that go and start again fresh tomorrow. So the fifth agreement is to be skeptical, but learn to listen. So this is really bringing out the power of doubt. And this goes back to what I was explaining at the very beginning, what the Ruizes are talking about as far as the language we are using, the symbols that we are using to spin stories. And that really everything that's going on in our lives is the drama that we've created. And we can change that story at any time. And so the be skeptical part is the allow yourself to be open to doubt, to allow yourself to look at what is going on in whatever situation you are living in right now, and to allow yourself to start seeing that this may not actually be true. There may be something else that I can say or see to explain this a little bit differently. When other people are talking to you, this is where we interpret what people are saying based on our own view of the world. And so this agreement, the be skeptical but learn to listen, it's not assume that everybody is lying. Assume that everybody is telling what they feel is their truth. But you start to realize that their truth is very different from your truth. And so not that they're necessarily trying to lie, but you don't have to believe and buy into what it is that they're saying. And if you learn to listen and truly listen to what it is that they are saying, you will start to learn where they are coming from. You'll start to learn their view of the world, and it'll start to open up opportunities for you to understand them better. So you don't have to buy into the story that they're spinning in order for you to be able to understand them better. You listen respectfully, understanding that everybody is where they need to be at in this moment in their lives, and that people, generally speaking, aren't going around trying to lie. They are going around creating what they think is the truth for themselves. And the Ruizes call this hell on earth. They are saying that there isn't an actual physical place of heaven here and hell here, that here, right here on earth, can be either heaven or hell, depending on the story that you're spinning, depending on how good you are at being truthful to yourself and seeing things for what they are. Right? You don't have to see this as a chair just because we've all agreed that this is a chair, basically. And I know this is really, really deep stuff, which is a really great reason to have the book club. So the irony with us holding the book club for this particular book is that I am going through and I am using my own perception of my worlds, all of my experiences, and how I look at things because of my experiences and because of my training and whatnot. I'm looking at what this book and the words in this book, the symbols in this book, what they mean to me. Some of these things are, they're direct passages right out of the book, but I'm spinning them and giving some examples and whatnot that could be from my own life or something that I'm assuming you're going to be able to actually resonate with. And so it's not that I am spinning a lie, it's that I'm spinning my version of truth of what this book looks like to me, which is the irony here, right? Because them writing the book is them spinning their truth of what their understanding is of the 5 agreements, right? And they even say that in the book themselves. So me giving my interpretation of this book is actually me spinning from my own point of view, which could be a whole bunch of lies without me being menacing and trying to spin lies. To me, it sounds like the truth but it's my version of what this book means to me and how I understand it. Right? So it's very, very interesting and deep. So after they talk about the 4 agreements in less detail than they do in the first book, the 4 agreements, and they talk about the 5th agreement, they start to talk about the dreams of attention. And they talked about this a little bit in the 4 agreements as well, if you read this. But they go into more detail here. There are 3 dreams of attention. So the first dream of attention is the victims, the dream of the victims. These are, from what they're saying, these are the people that are walking around in a dream, not realizing that they've created the world that they are living in. They have not allowed themselves to see their part in their world. And we all know probably a good number of people that are like this, who feel like the things that are happening in their world are out of their control. But in actuality, it is almost all of it is their control, right? They can shift how they're looking at things. They can shift their part by being impeccable with their word, not taking things personally, right? Not making assumptions, etc. Right? So they actually have a great amount of power that they are giving to others. So this is the dream of the first attention. They have no awareness of the real life that is really going on. They've created a whole life in a bubble. And once they start to get, once you start to get a little awareness that this may be a dream that you are creating, and I don't mean dream like nothing here exists. I just mean once you start to realize that you actually have some power here and you can make some significant changes in your life, you enter the dream of the second attention, which is the warrior. Now, the warrior is in a battle. Hence the warrior. The warrior is that kind of voice in your head that starts to doubt the stories that you are telling. It starts to doubt the different stories other people are saying. So the warrior might look like somebody goes to seek advice. They're shedding they're bearing their soul, so to speak, while they're doing this. And you, as the newfound warrior in your dream of the second attention, you are realizing, well, actually, what you are telling me is just your point of view. There's another point of view over here from the other people that are involved. They all have their own point of view. And so there's other ways to look at this. Your truth is only your truth to you. It's not the truth, right? And they start opening up their minds and their eyes to the fact that we are all telling what we believe is our version of the truth. Now, that doesn't mean that the warrior has transcended. The warrior actually, according to the Ruiz, is actually going back and forth between creating heaven on earth for themselves, where everything is going great and they're manifesting and they've got lots of fabulous things in their life, to creating hell on earth. So then they obviously go through a period where things are not going well. They're maybe experiencing loss and turmoil and whatnot, and then they bounce back to the heaven on earth. So they are in a real battle back and forth. But the great thing is that they are increasing their awareness, and that is the key part. When we are going from our dream of the second attention, the warrior, to the dream of the third attention, the master, this is where we are realizing that we are judging. That we are judging ourselves all the time. We are judging other people, right? All the time. And when we make this realization, when we are still in the dream of the second attention as the masters, as the warriors, we start to realize that we don't want that judgment anymore, that judgment actually doesn't belong here. And the moment that we have our last judgment is the moment that we shift to the dream of the third attention, the master. Now, the master are the people that know from their soul that we are all connected, right? They have a communion of love with everything in the universe. They know that we are life. So they can't pass judgment on somebody else because we are all one, okay? We come back to our real state, our divine self, our true self, when we are the master. We recover our full awareness. So they say that there are quite a number of people that are living in the first attention dream, right? Completely unaware that they're creating their own circumstances. There are a large number of the population that are living as the warriors, living the up and down, right? They're challenging, but they can't quite wrap their head around it. And then there are the few who have actually transcended to master, who now knows that they are one with the trees and with the sky and with every person on the planet. So judgment is gone. That sense of oneness is always there. So something to aspire to. So now they also talk about this in terms of becoming a seer. So the seer is basically the master who has a completely new point of view. They can see somebody coming over and sharing their story. They can see all the points of view from that. They can also respect where the person is coming from, because respect for the seer is a complete acceptance of everything just the way it is, not the way you want it to be. So when somebody comes to you, even when they're a dear loved one, and they are struggling and they're, saying this, that, and the other, and you know that they are spinning this, you know that they are living in a lie, and you know that if they could see the truth, they would have such a better life, you still respect the fact that this is where they are right now. It's their journey, and it's perfect just the way that it is. They are perfect just the way that they are, not the way that you would want them to be, right? In all circumstances, which I think is beautiful. It's my greatest takeaway from the book, and the thing that I try to remind myself. I'm not saying that I'm at the master level, but I try to remind myself of that, especially when it comes to my stepkids, right? Because it's so easy to allow yourself to get disappointed when they make a really bad mistake, right? When they make the wrong choice and it affects them. You can see the struggle that they're going to have because of that mistake that they've made. You can see the struggle that the family is all going to have because of the mistake that they made. And it's so easy to say, oh, I wish they would have just thought of this, or I wish they would have, listened to that, or whatever it is. And that's the one thing that I always take myself back and say to myself, he's perfect just the way that he is. He's exactly where he needs to be. He's doing exactly what he needs to be. And what he needs me to be is exactly what I'm going to be. Right? So I don't need him to change in order to love him. I don't need him to change in order to show him that he's respected, either of them. Right? So that's a huge takeaway for me, I find, with this book. And of course, I read these books 20 years ago, and that was clearly a huge takeaway, because I still do that. And I've just read it for the second time just over last week. And sometimes when I do these book clubs, I think, oh my goodness, that's where this came from. That's where my whole point of view on this. That's why I take myself off to the side and I do this. When I would have first read these books, this would have been a whole process. I would have had to try to go through, catching myself every time I was not impeccable with my word, or catch myself every time I was taking something personally. And eventually, when you have that kind of self-reflection and you go through these steps all the time, eventually they just start becoming second nature, and you forget where they even came from until you go back and you read the book again. You're like, that's where that came from. That's why I remove myself from the situation and remind myself that this person's path is their own path. It's their own journey. It's their own life to live. And we are all here to have a happy life. And if this is the path that he or she wants to take to have that happy life, then I am here to accept that. And I accept that by showing my respect for that. So the last thing that the Ruizes talk about is 3 languages. So again, going back to the concept of symbols. And They are saying that basically, we have to have communication. That's the way that we send messages to each other, that we share knowledge to each other. And so he calls us all messengers. And they actually say that when we are first born, that we are angels. We are angels with a message to share. And that message ends up getting distorted as we end up taking on all this knowledge from all of the adults around us that mold us and shape us into society. But that hopefully eventually we get to the message that it is that we are here to really share. And so there are 3 types of messengers that you could be. One is the gossip, right? And again, there is no judgment if you're resonating with this, because again, I resonated with this. This was the first time when I was in my 20s and I read this and went, I'm the gossip. I don't want to be the gossip. I'd like to be the master, but I am the gossip. I've got to take that. And I want to learn how to get from being the gossip to the next one, which is the warrior. Right. And so when you have that knowledge, when you can be honest with yourself and want to make the change, then you'll make the change. But if you're going to try to convince yourself that that's not you because you're ashamed of that, well, then you're just judging yourself. And that judgment is going to hold you back from you getting to where it is that you want to be. You've got to be able to acknowledge where you are now in order for you to get to where you want to be. All right. So no judgment here. The gossips know who you are, right? You're the ones, you don't have to be maniacal about your gossiping. I mean, there are people that do go out of their way, of course, like bullies, for example, that will go out of their way to share something so that they can try to hurt the person that they're talking about. But a lot of people gossip not with that intention at all. They know something about somebody and it just kind of comes out in conversation, or that's what they tell themselves anyways, is that it's coming out through conversation. And there is a reason why they are sharing that information. And again, it all comes down to these lies and these truths that we are telling ourselves using symbols. So be honest with yourself for why it is that you feel it's necessary to share somebody else's personal information with somebody else, right? Because you're getting something from that, and you won't really know how to change that until you understand what you're getting from it. The second is the warrior. So again, this is the person that is now challenging, right? Your message is more of a challenging nature. You're starting to look at people and see their story that they've woven for themselves, and you're starting to be respectful of that story and their need for that story. But then you're also having some difficulty perhaps with integrating and really understanding this for yourself personally, perhaps, right? So you have this up and down. You have these moments where life is wonderful. You've created heaven on earth. And then you have these moments where life is terrible and you've created hell on earth, right? And so the warrior goes back and forth, but the warrior is making huge strides in their awareness. So it's definitely a step up from gossip. Right? And the last messenger is the messenger of truth. And that's the person who completely understands the stories that are going on, and that the symbols themselves are not even true. The symbols are just things that we've all agreed on as being an accepted thing. This chair is this chair, right? I call this a sweater, right? I call this a glass or a travel water bottle or reusable water bottle. I call this a mouse, right? That doesn't mean that that's what those things are. It just means that that's what we've agreed to call those things, and that the word that we put there is going to mean this, right? So the person who is the messenger of truth is seeing everything for what it really is, and they're doing that by listening fully and being skeptical at the same time. So not only are you being skeptical of what other people are saying, but you're not believing yourself at all. Right? And that is very different from you not believing in yourself. Right? Not believing yourself is, right, the message that goes on in your own head when things don't work out so well, when you are pushed out of your comfort zone, when you're pushed outside your limits, right? When maybe it's something that pushes you into anxiety, right? How you respond, those words that you say to yourself, you don't believe yourself. Don't believe those words. You only allow yourself to be a messenger of truth. And people who are messengers of truth tend to not speak that often, because the truth, the Ruizes argue that the truth is something that you just know. You don't have to use any language or any symbols in order to understand the truth, because in essence, all the symbols that we have are just made up words. And so you don't need them to understand the truth. The truth comes from within. The truth is we're all one. The truth is we're here to live a happy life, however that looks for each of us. So I hope that that makes sense. They end the book with urging you to ask yourself, what kind of messenger am I? Right? Am I the gossip? Am I the warrior? Or am I the messenger of truth? Where is it that you want to fall on that spectrum? Where would you like to move to? All right. So again, coming from a place of non-judgment, coming from a place of pure respect, which means you accept everything, including yourself, for exactly the way that it is, including the way that you are, not the way you want it to be. So you can have a goal of what you would like to be. I want to be the messenger of truth, but right now I'm the messenger of gossip. Right? You can do that without any judgment on yourself and saying, right, all right, so for me to move to messenger of truth, I have to first get to messenger of the warrior. And messenger of the warrior is going to be somebody who is more aware, who starts to realize that the words that are coming out of other people's mouths are just the story that they've made up for their lives, that they aren't necessarily saying the truth. They're saying the truth as they believe it to be for themselves, but it doesn't mean it is the truth. It doesn't mean it's something that you have to believe. You can be skeptical, while at the same time being respectful enough to listen and understand that this is where they are, and allow yourself to listen fully and completely to understand what their needs are and where they're coming from, so that you can understand them better without actually buying in to the story that's being said, right? That is the warrior. Okay. I hope that this made sense. I know it's a very, very deep book, and I could go on for hours and hours and hours with this. And it looks like we probably picked a difficult time of the day. I know Sundays can sometimes be difficult, but if you catch this on the replay and you'd like to chime in, I would love to hear your thoughts, any questions that you have, and you are welcome to sign up for the book club. It's obviously free. I just do it here on Facebook, but signing up for the book club gets you on the book club mailing list, which means that I send you out a reminder. I let you know. So within a couple of days from this, for example, you get an email with this video so that you can go back and watch it. You don't have to scroll all through my Facebook to try to find where the video is. Right? You've got it right in your inbox. And then I also send you an email letting you know what the next book is, with plenty of time for you to purchase the book, read the book, right? And then you get a reminder just before so that you can hopefully make it on live. So if you'd like to do that, just go to my website. I've put the link in the description just above, but it's lifelikeyoumeanit.com/book-club. And you can go ahead and sign up for that for free. Until next time, it'll be 6 weeks. So I'll have to look up the date, but we'll probably be getting really close to Christmas at that time. So I might push it a little bit longer. But the next book that we are going to do is The Power of Now, an Eckhart Tolle book. So I will be posting that out in the emails along with the link for you to be able to purchase that. And look out for an announcement here on Facebook as well that reminds you of that with all of the links. Okay. Bless, and I hope you got as much out of this as I did. Until next time.